Okay, so like a lot of people listening, I'm sure, we all have our smartphones, right? But can they actually like really help us get healthier?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think especially, if you're already like going to the doctor, getting advice from, nutritionists, all that kind of stuff, can a smartphone app actually make a difference?
Exactly, yeah. Because we're all about, getting knowledge quickly and efficiently here on the deep dive. And so much of that is about, habits and routines and all that. And like one of the big challenges with, just traditional health advice is that people don't always stick with it, right? It's hard to make those changes last.
Yeah, totally. And so today we're going to like dive into a study that looks at this exact question, right? Using a smartphone app as a way to kind of like supplement the advice that people are already getting from, healthcare professionals for people who are at risk of getting like diabetes or other lifestyle related diseases.
Awesome. So this study is called The Usefulness of an Application-Supported Nutritional Intervention on Non-High-Density Lipoprotein Cholesterol in People with a Risk of Lifestyle-Related Diseases.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but don't worry, we'll break it down.
But the main takeaway is really like, can an app, on top of everything else you're doing, can that really lead to better health outcomes?
Exactly. And not just better outcomes, but like, are those outcomes sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Like, do they stick over time or do they kind of like, fizzle out after a few weeks?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like we've all downloaded that fitness app or that, calorie tracker with all the best intentions. But how many of us are still using those apps like 6 months later?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this study so interesting because it tries to look at both the short-term and the long-term effects of using one of these apps.
Okay, so before we get into like the actual study itself,
Yeah.
Can you give us a little context? Like where did this research take place and what's the healthcare system like there?
Yeah, so this study was done in Japan, which has actually had this like really interesting nationwide program for tackling lifestyle-related diseases since 2008.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like a national program. That's pretty major.
Yeah, it's called the Specific Health Checkups and Specific Health Guidance Program, or SHC and SHG for short.
Got it. So SHC and SHG.
Yeah, and basically it's like this huge effort to try to get people to adopt healthier habits and prevent these chronic conditions from developing.
So it sounds like a really great initiative, but like we were talking about earlier, I'm guessing there are some challenges, right? Like even with a program this big, people don't always stick with it.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest challenges they've found, right? Like they call it low retention rates, meaning people kind of like drop out of the program or they don't follow the guidance as closely as they should.
And I'm guessing the other challenge is like, even if people do see some initial results, those results don't always last, right?
Exactly. Like it's really hard to make those changes stick in the long term. And that's where they're hoping that digital tools like smartphone apps might be able to help.
Okay, so that brings us to this study, right? They wanted to see if adding a smartphone app on top of this existing national program could make a difference.
Exactly. And the app they used is called Askin.
Askin, okay.
And they basically divided their participants into two groups, right? One group got the usual specific health guidance from, a healthcare professional. And they also got to use the Askin app.
Okay, so they had like the human support plus the app.
Exactly. And then the other group was like the control group. So they only got the standard specific health guidance, no app.
Got it. So it's like comparing the traditional approach to this kind of like blended human plus tech approach.
Exactly. And they had two different kind of like time frames for this.
Okay, so like short-term and long-term.
Yeah, so they had a 3-month group, which is like the short-term intervention, and then a 6-month group, which is the long-term intervention.
Okay, got it. And how many people were in each group?
So in the short-term group, there were 23 people using the app and 29 in the control group.
Okay.
And then in the long-term group, it was 35 in the app group and 22 in the control group.
Got it. So like not huge groups, but still enough to get some interesting data.
Exactly. And like before we get into the results, I think it's important to understand, like, what were they actually measuring? Like, what were they looking for to see if this app was actually making a difference?
Right, like were they looking at weight loss or blood sugar levels or what?
So their main focus, the primary outcome, was the change in non-high-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels.
Non-high density what now?
Yeah, it's a mouthful, non-HDLC, they call it.
Okay, non-HDLC.
Basically, it's a way of measuring the cholesterol that's not the good kind.
So like not HDL, which is the good cholesterol.
Right, exactly. So this includes LDL, which is like the bad cholesterol you always hear about, but it also includes other stuff that can be bad for your heart.
Okay, so it's like a broader measure of all the not so good cholesterol in your blood.
Exactly, and it's a really good predictor of ischemic heart disease.
Ischemic heart disease, which is basically like when your arteries get all clogged up, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so they were looking at non-HDLC as their primary outcome because it's a really good indicator of overall cardiovascular health.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'm guessing they were also looking at other stuff too, right? Like not just non-HDLC.
Yeah, so they had a bunch of secondary outcomes that they were tracking, like the full lipid profile. So that's your total cholesterol, your triglycerides, your HDLC, and your LDLC.
God, so they were looking at the whole picture of cholesterol.
Yeah, and they were also looking at metabolic markers like body weight, BMI, HbA1c, which is a measure of your average blood sugar levels over time,
Okay.
and blood pressure. And then for the people who were using the app, they were also keeping track of how often they were logging in and using it.
Right, because like that's a big part of this too, right? Like is the app actually engaging enough that people will keep using it over time?
Exactly. So let's get into the results now.
Okay, let's do it.
So starting with the short-term group, the 3-month group,
Yeah.
they found that right after the 3 months were up, the people who were using the app had a significantly bigger improvement in their non-HDLC levels compared to the control group.
Oh, wow. So like right away they were seeing a difference.
Yeah, so the app users had an average reduction of almost 4 milligdl,
Right.
while the control group actually saw their non-HDLC go up a little bit.
Interesting. So it seems like the app is actually having a positive impact on cholesterol levels, even in just that short amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just non-HDLC. They also found that both groups, the app users and the control group, both saw improvements in their body weight and their BMI.
Okay, so both groups were losing weight.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that those improvements were still there even a year later.
Wow. So it seems like the traditional guidance was also pretty effective at helping people lose weight and keep it off.
Yeah, exactly. And the control group also saw improvements in their HDL cholesterol and their triglycerides right after the 3 months were up. And the app group showed similar improvements, but it took them a little longer to get there, like they saw those improvements at the 1-year follow-up.
Okay, interesting. So it seems like both approaches were having some positive effects, but there are also some differences in like the timing of those effects.
Exactly. And it wasn't all good news. They also found that the app users actually saw their systolic blood pressure get worse after the 3 months.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and the control group saw both their systolic and their diastolic blood pressure get worse.
Huh. So it seems like focusing on like one aspect of health, like cholesterol doesn't always mean that everything else will improve too.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that health is really complex and everything's interconnected.
Yeah, totally. And what about LDL specifically? Did they see any differences there between the two groups?
Yeah, they did. They found that the app users had a bigger reduction in their LDL cholesterol after the 3 months compared to the control group.
Okay, so the app seemed to be helping with the bad cholesterol specifically.
Yeah, and they also looked at how many people were actually using the app, right? Because like we were saying earlier, engagement is a big issue.
Yeah, totally. Like, are people actually sticking with it?
Right. So they found that at the end of the 3 months, 92% of the people in the app group were still using it.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so that initial engagement was really high. But then when they checked in a year later, only 40% of those people were still using the app.
Oh, wow. So a pretty big drop-off.
Yeah, so even though people were using the app pretty consistently during those first 3 months, it seems like it was harder to keep using it once that initial kind of like structured guidance period was over.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like that initial motivation kind of fades away.
Exactly. So now let's move on to the long-term group, the 6-month group.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So they found that there was no significant difference in non-HDLC levels between the app group and the control group.
Oh, wow. Really? So like the app didn't make a difference in the long term?
Not for non-HDLC, no.
Huh. That's surprising because in the short term, it seemed like it was having a positive impact.
Yeah, it is surprising. And it suggests that maybe that initial benefit of the app kind of wears off over time, or maybe the traditional guidance catches up.
Interesting. Okay, so what about the other stuff they were measuring? Like, did the app have any impact on those outcomes in the long term?
So they did see improvements in HDL triglycerides, body weight, BMI, HbA1c, and systolic blood pressure in the app group after the 6 months.
Okay.
But they also saw some of those same improvements in the control group. So it's hard to say for sure whether the app was responsible for those changes or not.
Right, because both groups were getting the traditional guidance.
Exactly. And then when they followed up a year later, the only improvement that was still there in the app group was the systolic blood pressure, and there were no lasting improvements in the control group.
Huh. So it seems like even with the longer intervention, it was still really hard to make those changes stick in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And the app usage in the long-term group followed a similar pattern to the short-term group.
Okay, meaning people stopped using it over time.
Exactly. So they started out with about 58% of the people in the app group using it regularly at the end of the 6 months, and then a year later, it was down to less than 19%.
Wow, so even with the longer intervention, people were still dropping off.
Yeah, it seems like that long-term engagement is really the biggest hurdle.
Okay, so we've talked about the short-term group, the long-term group. Did the researchers try to like combine the data from both groups to get like a bigger picture?
They did, yeah. They did what's called a meta-analysis, which is basically like pooling all the data together to see if there are any overall trends.
Okay, cool. And what did they find?
So when they combined the data from both groups, they found that the people who used the app had significantly better total cholesterol levels compared to the control group.
Oh, wow. Okay, so even though the non-HDLC benefit didn't last in the long term, there was still an overall positive effect on cholesterol when people used the app.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really important because it suggests that the app can have a real impact on some key health markers, even if it doesn't solve the problem of long-term engagement.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this Askin app itself. Like,
Right.
what are its key features? What makes it different from other health apps out there?
So one of the coolest things about Askin is that it has this food logging feature that uses automatic photo analysis.
Oh, wow. So you can just like take a picture of your food and it logs it for you.
Exactly, yeah. And it's powered by deep learning. So it has this huge database of over 100,000 different foods. And it can recognize like restaurant meals, homemade dishes, all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome because like manually logging everything you eat is such a pain.
Yeah, totally. And it also gives you personalized nutritional therapy based on the Japanese dietary guidelines.
Okay.
So it's not just logging your food, it's also giving you feedback on what you're eating and how to improve your diet.
That's cool. And it's all like algorithm driven, so it's tailored to you specifically.
Exactly. And it also lets you track other stuff like your weight, your step count, and there are even these optional peer support features so you can connect with other people who are using the app and kind of like support each other.
Oh, that's cool. Like a little community aspect.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that's really unique about Askin is that it has this virtual character that gives you feedback.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that. It's like
Yeah.
a little animated person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Her name is Miki, and she's designed to give you feedback in a way that's engaging and encouraging.
Interesting. So, like, she's not just like a robotic voice.
Yeah.
She actually has some personality.
Yeah, and apparently she uses a lot of different wording and facial expressions to kind of like keep things interesting.
That's a really cool idea.
Ah.
I think that could definitely help with engagement. Because, like, you're not just interacting with a machine, you're interacting with, like, a virtual coach.
Yeah, exactly. And the researchers actually compared their findings to some previous research that had looked at other health apps, and they found that their results for non-HDLC were pretty similar to another study that had used an app for a 3-month dietary intervention.
Okay.
But that other study was only done with men, and it involved more frequent self-monitoring of things like blood glucose and blood pressure, and they didn't see the same kinds of improvements in other metabolic parameters.
So it seems like the specific features of an app and how much it encourages people to track their health can really have an impact on the outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the big takeaways from this study is that it's not just about having an app, it's about having an app that's well-designed and engaging and that really helps people stay on track with their goals.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What are like the main insights we can take away from this study about using these kinds of apps alongside traditional health guidance?
So I think the biggest takeaway is that adding a smartphone app can be a really valuable addition to short-term nutritional guidance.
Especially for improving non-HDLC.
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like the app can help people see faster results in that initial phase.
And it's encouraging to see that initial high level of engagement in the short-term app group.
Yeah, definitely. But the flip side of that is that it's really hard to keep people using the app over time.
Yeah, even with the longer intervention period, people were still dropping off.
Exactly. And so I think the authors of the study make a good point, which is that these apps can be a really useful supplement to traditional health guidance, but they're not a replacement for it.
Right. It's like it's about finding the right balance between technology and the human touch.
Exactly. And there are a few limitations to the study that are worth mentioning.
Okay, what are those?
So first of all, it was an open label study, which means that the participants knew which group they were in,
Okay.
and that could have biased their behavior or how they reported their progress.
Right, because if you know you're using the app, you might be more likely to, like, try harder or something.
Exactly. And also, the people who chose to use the app were probably already more motivated to make changes to their lifestyle.
Right, so it wasn't like a random sample.
Exactly. And it's also hard to completely isolate the effect of the app itself because everyone in the app group was also getting the traditional guidance.
Right, so it's like a combination of factors.
Yeah, and finally, some of the people in the study might have already had experience with this specific health guidance system in Japan, which could have influenced their results.
Okay, so some things to keep in mind when interpreting the findings.
Exactly. But overall, I think this is a really interesting study that sheds some light on the potential of using smartphone apps to improve people's health.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me is that these apps can be a really powerful tool, but that long-term engagement is still a huge challenge.
Totally. And I think that raises a really interesting question for our listeners, which is like, what strategies do you think could be most effective in keeping people motivated and engaged with these kinds of apps over time?
Yeah, that's a great question to ponder because I think as technology continues to evolve, we're going to see more and more of these health and wellness apps, and it's going to be really important to figure out how to make them work for people in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really exciting area of research, and I think there's a lot of potential there to really make a difference in people's lives.
Awesome. Well, thanks for breaking down this study for us.
Well, yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
And for our listeners, thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive, and we'll see you next time.